Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Collecting at the Time of Service, Improving Revenue Without Sacrificing the Human Component, brought to you by Tom Klitsch of AR Logics. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received during the question and answer portion. Additionally, an electronic version of this presentation will be emailed to all participants following completion of today's webinar, and a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, NJMGMA would like to thank you for attending, and I will now turn things over to Tom.
Well, thank you, Dawn, and welcome everybody. I realize that everyone has a busy schedule here, so I really would like to get right down to it. And what I want to do is all the while we're reviewing the information today, I want you to think about your own experiences. Not only the experiences inside your own office where you work, but the experiences yourself that you've had when you walked in for services at your own provider. Now, I think of a few when I walk into my provider, like the time that I arrived to the office, and I'm the only one standing at the window. And there are 3 staff members playing Pokemon. Now, I know this might seem a little bit funny, but this has actually happened to me. When they looked up at me and told me, "I'll be right with you as soon as we catch Pikachu." Or there's one person at the phone, and there's 2 others talking about what they made for dinner the night before without even acknowledging me. Now, think about how that makes you feel. I would say that it makes me feel that I'm not important to them, or that they really don't care about me or the time that I had to take off of work or to reschedule something to make their visit. What do you think when you hear these stories? And as a patient, how do you think I feel? And what do you think I'm going to do when I leave their office? Is this happening at your office? How do you think your patients are going to talk about you and their experience at your office? Are you leaving them with a good or a bad experience? Now, our presentation today will aim on improving those times of service stories while also improving on your ability to collect from the patients at the time of service. Now, of course, there are some legal things here that we do have to get out of the way. So I'm not going to read everything, but the legal disclaimer down at the bottom is that the information in this presentation is not intended for legal advice and may not be used as legal advice. So that's the only line I'm going to read, because we all know the legal mumble jumble. But one of the things that I am going to do today is, because I am a third-party collection agency, we always teach all of our prospectives, our clients, or anybody that we go out to teach in seminars through the FDCPA. Now, what is the FDCPA? The FDCPA is the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. And what this does is this prohibits collectors from using abusive, unfair, deceptive practices to collect from consumers and provides requirements for handling credit disputes. Now, you might think, well, geez, why do I want to know about this? Well, simply because we want to make sure, and we want to teach in the strictest rules to make you the smallest target out there for any of the different lawsuits that are going on. And believe me, there are a lot of different things that are happening out there with patients and providers. So that's why we teach it this way. So I don't want you to think that you have to abide by this because you are a first party, but we like to teach as strict as we possibly can. Now, moving on through this webinar, we're going to cover 4 different topics or points here. And one is having the right mindset. We want to make sure that everybody is in the right mindset when you're dealing with patients. Part 2, we want to understand why patients don't pay. Part 3, we're going to talk a little bit about collecting through the full entire revenue cycle, as well as Part 4, which is to improve the time of service collections. Now, having the right mindset. What I would like to do is actually start off with a small role play in making a telephone call to one of my patients. Now, you might think, well, what does this have to do with the time of service? It really has to do with seeing if you are in the right mindset. So if I was to make a call to one of the patients, this is probably what you would hear.
Hello?
Hello, may I speak to Ms. Coldren, please?
She's not here right now.
Do you know when she'll be available?
I'm not sure. I have to go. Click.
Well, you know when she'll be available? The second she hangs up the phone. Now, what does this demonstration demonstrate? It demonstrates the right mindset. Now, let me talk a little bit about this. You kind of made this a very formal call when you called her. And when calling about a payment from a medical practice, one of the things is you want to be as friendly as possible. So let's try this another way. Let's see if this works differently.
Hello?
Hello, Michelle.
Yes, this is she. Who is this?
Hi, Michelle. This is Tom, and I'm calling from ABC Pediatrics. I'm calling in reference to an outstanding bill for your son, Keegan, for the date of service of 6/22/16 in the amount of $250. How do you wish to pay for this bill today? We offer Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and check by phone.
Well, you see, I really do want to pay this bill. However, I just lost my job, and I had to move back in with my parents until I can get back on my feet. And Macy's, well, they just called, and I worked out a payment arrangement with them.
Now, how many of you think she is going to pay this bill? Again, put yourself in the right mindset. And what I mean by that is, a lot of us would think, oh, okay, she lost her job, she's living with her parents, and somebody else just called and got my money. Well, not really, because that's not what I heard. What I heard was, I really do want to pay this bill. She told you right out she wants to pay it. She acknowledges that she owes the bill. Second, what I heard was, is she moved back in with her parents until she can get her feet back on solid ground. Well, that tells me right there that there's probably somebody helping her pay and manage her bills. And number three, she worked out a payment arrangement with Macy's. So it also tells me that there's some type of payment arrangement that you can probably go after to try to get this bill collected. And I'm sure a lot of you who have children over the age of 18, if something would have happened to them, you belong to the Check Writers Club. If they came to you for something, you're probably going to help them out the best that you possibly can. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to talk about being in the right mindset. Now, there's those conflicting mindsets out there. There's the one where I work very hard and live within my means so I can pay my bills and everyone else should. And then there's that second mindset. I've been in this situation before where I was unable to pay my bills, and I understand how that feels. Now, I'm sure many of us are usually to the left side of that chart. You know, the one where it says, I work very hard, live within my means, I pay my bills, and everyone else should. That is usually the mindset that we get into when that patient that comes up into the front of your office to check in for their appointment, and they have a brand new Michael Kors bag and newly manicured nails. And when you ask for their co-payment, they give you pushback, or they don't have any money to pay their co-payment. And right away you think, well, sure, but you can afford the bag and you can afford the gel nails, but you can't afford to pay my bill? But here's what you don't know, that the bag could have been a gift and the nails could have been done for a wedding that she was invited to over the weekend and was probably paid for by a maid of honor or something like that. Or perhaps maybe the patient did buy the bag, had her nails done, but now she had some unexpected health issue that she has not budgeted for, or he has not budgeted for. So, if you are of the first mindset, we want to try to put yourself in the shoes of the patient. And here's what we have is we have a real great video that we want to play, and we want to show you and share with you a little bit about a different mindset that could be out there. Wow, that's a pretty powerful video. And I get a little choked up every time I see it because I think of my kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, you know, it's putting that human component back into to things. So what we really need to do is we really need to help patients understand the business of healthcare. You know, it's not only important to change your mindset, but that of the patients. We naturally do not see ourselves and others from the same perspective. What we have to do is we actually have to leave your place and visit their place. We have to acknowledge the other person has a valid viewpoint, and really we have to check our attitude. You know, patients do not consider the value of services being provided, the cost to have the best doctors or equipment, or what is needed to provide that great health care that you're providing. They have to find that common ground with the patient, or we have to find that common ground with the patient. And this is often the need for excellent care and that your practice can provide for them. You know, what we have to do is we actually have to find that 1%, just that 1% that we agree on, and give it 100% of the effort to go after. And that's actually the 101% principle. We're going to talk about the power of thought. Power thoughts are very important. And, you know, like Joyce Myers says, set your mind that you won't be bitter, angry, resentful. You may not be able to help what you feel, but if you change what you think, your feelings will catch up with you. And again, there's that perception, there's the emotion, and of course there's the reaction. So you just have to think about that when you're in front of your patients at the time of service, when they're coming in to pay, those power of thoughts. What you perceive is going to show through in your emotion, and that's how you're going to react. Now here's one other quote, and it's actually by John Maxwell. He basically states that what you see only accounts for 7% of what is believed. Now the way that you say things accounts for 38%, and what others see accounts for 55%. So your body actions, okay? Your body actions when you're talking to a patient can reflect on how good you're going to be able to collect at the time of service. So consider this when talking to your patients. If you're thinking that if you're thinking that you don't believe they can pay, then that is what your patient is seeing, no matter what you're actually saying. Now, understanding why the patients don't pay in part 2, we're going to discuss a little bit. We have discussed the changing of your mindset and, of course, your patients. But it's also important to understand why patients don't pay, so you can understand the barriers that you may come up against. Now, in order to collect more from your patients, you need to understand, again, of course, why those patients don't pay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the next slide that actually has why people pay their medical bills last. And I'll go over the slide with you shortly. But one of the barriers, of course, is priority. The people pay their medical bills based on emotion. Think about it. How do you pay your bills? You know, do you sit down there next to file 13 and just open up and you see something that comes across that doesn't have anything on it really, and it might be a bill, and you just go, trash it. That's what a lot of patients do, okay? I personally don't believe that statements collect money. I believe you have to get on the phone with that personal connection. Call them, speak to them, okay? And they'll pay their medical bills, again, on that emotion. What is important to them? How will they pay their bills? When a patient needs care for your service, it's important to them. Think about it. You might be contacting a patient for 30, 60, 90, 120. They don't pay the bill, but now all of a sudden they need to come back in and see you. You're now important to them. So now you tell them, well, we're not going to see you, or you have an outstanding balance. We'll see you once you pay the outstanding balance, or however you handle your practice. But 9 times out of 10, they'll pay you when they need you. Several weeks later, when they receive that bill after the insurance and they're feeling better, again, you're back in the same situation. Your bill is no longer important to them. This is why you must collect at the time of service when you are still a priority. You know, the specialists that generally develop a more meaningful and long-lasting relationship are the ones that usually typically collect more. And if we go back to the chart, you're going to see that general surgery usually is the one that collects the less. Why? There's probably more of a disconnect from the patient. As you go all the way down to the bottom, look at pediatrics, family, OBGYN, multi-specialty. There's probably more of a connection or interaction with the patients. That's why they collect better. The second one is going to be delinquent and unforeseen circumstances. You know, number one, divorce. Believe it or not, 50%, of course, of all marriages in America still end up in divorce. I know, I'm one of them. I'm going my second time around, okay? So it is, of course, very hard. And sometimes when you're a pediatric group and the parents are going through a divorce, one parent thinks the other parent's supposed to pay for that patient, for the child. Well, here's the thing that we always say. We have a little saying here that says, you weren't in the church when they got married. You weren't in the courtroom when they got divorced. Their anger is usually at the ex, and it has nothing to do with the bill. But then again, you have to try to find that common ground to get that bill paid. The other one, of course, is serious illness, you know, that unforeseen bill, the things that we just basically saw in the video. Patients don't want to get hurt or want to get sick. It just happens. And, of course, the inability to work. And underinsured rates, of course, they continue to rise. I mean, even the entry-level bronze plans are only required to cover about 60% of covered medical expenses and can have more than $6,200 of annual cap on an out-of-pocket expense. A lot of us are all going through that. You have to find ways to work with that patient up front, and again, more at the time of service. Now, one of the things I want to give you some information on here, and again, this is for strictly education purposes. You can always refer or come back to our YouTube channel and go to Objection and Excuses videos. We have many of them that can help you and teach your staff, and again, they're free. We're not here to sell you anything. We're here to educate. So take advantage of that. One of the other things now we're going to talk about in part 3 is collecting through the revenue cycle. You know, in the face of these issues, of course, why patients don't pay, you really need to collect through the entire revenue cycle for the best results. And following this model improves patient collection, patient engagement, and the patient experience, and even reimbursement from third-party payers. Now, with higher patient responsibility, they need to work with patients throughout, again, that entire revenue cycle. You need to help them, and this will help them understand their responsibility. Step 1 for improving that is, of course, at the pre-service. You know, establish expectations. When your patient comes in for that first time and they're going to fill out their demographic and give you all that demographic information, you want to sit down and establish those expectations with them. Discuss your payment policy prior to their appointment. And of course, make sure you have that all in writing. Create a clear payment policy. This will ensure a more organized collection process if you have to send it out of your office for collections. Provide an estimate. 61% of the patients are surprised by their out-of-pocket costs. And 2 out of 3 patients, I should say, report a positive billing experience when they were given an estimate up front. I would love that. As long as I know what I'm going to pay, there's a way that I can probably sit down and work out a payment arrangement or an acceptable payment arrangement with you at that time. And change your culture. Educate, motivate, and empower the staff to collect from their patients. You know, you have to touch back on your employee and the mindset. It cannot be uncomfortable to ask for money. You need to know that the practice supports what your employee is doing. So You have to have the right person up front to do that job. If they're afraid to ask for money, you probably have the wrong person up there. And docs need to be on board. This has to come from the top down. Docs have to be on board and empower their people. They can't be letting the patient get back to them and them telling the patient not to worry about the bill. They have to support their staff, which will help collect more money. And the steps to improve the revenue and patient satisfaction throughout the revenue cycle: at the time of service, you have to ask for payment in full 100% of the time. Again, it goes back to the staffing. If the person's afraid to ask, you're not going to get it. And think about this. If you ask for payment in full 100% of the time, you'll usually get it 18% of the time. Be prepared not to hear or to hear no 4 out of 5 times. But if you don't ask, you'll never receive it. And that one, of course, is better than nothing. Okay? You have to begin a discussion about a payment plan at that time. By this time, your patient already should be familiar with your payment policy because that happened at pre-registration. And provide meaningful information. Give the patient a copy of their insurance verification and any other information that may help them understand their responsibility. And determine the barrier to payment and find the solution. Go back to that first role play that we had when we spoke to Michelle. Her barrier was a loss of job. Okay? The loss of job was her barrier. She moved back with her parent, and she already had a payment arrangement set up. So you already know what the barrier was. You should be able to come up with a solution from there and help her get into a payment arrangement to help her get your bill paid, just as if they did for Macy's to get their bill paid. Now, at the post-service, you want to follow up early. As soon as you receive the EOB, you should be calling the patient to discuss the responsibility. This goes back to staying on top and being on top of the mind of your patient and keeping your bill important to them. Remember, the longer you wait, the harder it is to contact and get reconnected with that patient. So stay on top. Follow up early and stay engaged. According to the AHA, which is the American Hospital Association, nearly 75% of the best performers start collection follow-up in less than 30 days from discharge. And you're probably thinking, well, geez, my bill didn't even drop yet to the insurance company. But that's what you have to do nowadays. Make payments easy. Offer various methods of payment arrangements and discuss the different payment options. And check charity care eligibility. You never know what's going on with your patient as far as charity care. Check that eligibility. Use it if you have it available to you. And here's a big one. Appeal denied claims. I mean, believe it or not, approximately only 35% of denied claims are appealed. And to me, that is a big, large of amount of a missed opportunity for revenue. And of course, lastly, once you get your patient set up, monitor payment arrangements. You have to make sure you're keeping your patient on those payment arrangements throughout the times that they're making the payments. Now let's talk a little bit about times of service of collections here in part 4. You know, we just covered collecting through the revenue cycle, but now we're going to focus more on the time of service, which is the greatest opportunity to collect and connect with your patients. Remember, it's all about the connecting to the patients. It's how you go about speaking to them, interacting with them, and getting things and getting involved is going to help you get paid better. If we go to the next chart here, I just want to show you what the cost of collections increases over time looks like. And what you have to see here is at the time of service is your best opportunity, because 7 to 30 days after, it goes down to 50%. 30 to 120 days, it's at 33%, and 120 days and greater is probably around 13%. So if you wait and do not collect at the time of service, you will most likely ever receive 50% of what is owed. Now, here's what really baffles me. Let me ask you guys a question. If you have a car, and let's just say Mercedes, and let's say that car was valued at $100,000, and if you woke up tomorrow and your car was stolen, would you wait 120 days to call the cops? I don't think so. I think I'd be on the phone right away. As a matter of fact, I'd probably be pretty frantic. Okay? And let me tell you how much co-pays matter here. If you think co-pays don't matter, when that patient comes in and you say, oh, I'll just send you out a bill, or don't worry about it, we'll get to it later on. Here's how much they matter. Just think of an average copay of being about $40. And let's say that they see 25 patients. Now, this is on one provider, and I know many of you have many providers, so this is just based off of one provider. So that provider sees 25 patients a day. That's $1,000 a day. Now, let's just say there's 200 work days in a year. That's $200,000 of copays per provider each year. Do you think you should be starting to collect your copays up front? I would think so. Let's move on to the next slide, which is actually shifting from volume to value. And I know this is probably difficult because of the way the healthcare industry goes. They want to get everybody in and get everybody out, and docs, I only want the doc to see the patient for 15 minutes and get them in and get them out and so on and so forth. But it does not take into consideration the patient being seen by the front-end staff or the billing people or things like that. So you really have to spend time. You know, historically, we only gathered basic information at the pre-service, and at the time of service, we got the copay collected and no bill was calculated or received. And then at post-service, the amount due was calculated. Patients were notified of financial responsibility after the insurance bill and paid. Today, or in the future, we need to gather information and prospectively calculate an expected out-of-pocket cost. And at service, we need
Bear with us, folks. It looks like we have some audio problems. Please hold for 1 second. Bear with us one more second, folks. We're correcting the audio problem now. Thanks for your patience, folks. Our presenter is dialing back in right now. We should have him back up and running in just a second.
Dawn? Do they have me? No.
Yes, Tom, you're broadcasting now.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened, but I definitely extremely apologize, and I will pick up from this part here. Where did you guys last hear me, Dawn?
Just the last screen. It was maybe 30 seconds before I was able to reach you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I'm going to pick up from the right people for the right job, and I apologize, everyone. So what we have to talk about here is having the right people for the right job. Your employees need to be educated. They need to be well-trained, held accountable, and they have to have the right tools for that job. Again, they need to be motivated. They need to be able to ask for that money and be able to connect with the patients. They also need to be empowered. This is what I was talking about earlier. There has to be the buy-in from the top down. They have to be the leaders for that change, and they have to set that example. Improving patient engagement starts with the employee engagement and ensuring that they have the right people for that job. Now let's talk about the next slide here, and this next slide can be a little crazy because you're thinking, well, what's a three-legged stool have to do with anything? Well, there's three legs that hold up that stool, and you have to be part of those legs. So what you really have to do is you have to have an emotional engagement workforce that leads to an emotionally engaged patient, which leads to organizational success. And that first leg there makes the same commitment to you have to make the same commitment to your employees as you do to your patients. You have to create that emotional engagement. And there is also that core of competence. Every member of your staff should have these three cores: knowledge, skill, and attitude. And creating and hiring for these first two are pretty easy. But the last one is probably the most difficult and should be the one that you look for when you are hiring someone to come into your office. Now, why customers leave? And we do call patients customers nowadays. Think about it. There's consumerism in healthcare. You have the web now. I mean, everybody's shopping around for everything. 9% will leave because of competitors. 10% will leave for personal reasons, like maybe a relocation or something to that effect. And 14% will leave because of product dissatisfaction. Now, where is your most percentage? It's 67% will leave because of the attitude or indifference of one of the employees. Think about it. Think about yourself when you go somewhere and you have a bad experience. What do? You tell everybody you see, and they'll go somewhere else. Now, I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. I apologize for the little hiccup there. Again, as Dawn said, you're going to get this electronically, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact Dawn. She can contact me, or you can contact me directly, and I'll be more than happy to go over things with you that you missed. One of the things I want you to understand is please get social with us out there. We can be found just about anywhere on social media. And again, we are here to help any way that we can. Education is very important to us, so please check it out. And again, there's nothing here that we charge for. So thank you, Dawn. Thank you to the New Jersey MGMA, and I'm going to kick it now back to you.
Okay, Tom, we're just going to open it up for questions right now. I'm not seeing any questions in the question box right now, so folks, we'll give it a couple seconds here to see if we receive any questions. If not, we'll close the webinar out and get the presentations out over to you. Again, you can follow up directly with Tom and his team with any questions that you may have if you don't feel comfortable putting them in the question box today. Give it just a couple seconds here, and if we don't receive anything, we'll close it out. Okay, Tom, great job. It looks like we don't have any questions. That was a really thorough webinar. I appreciate it. And again, we will be sending the presentations out later on this afternoon. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.